Hello everybody and welcome back to the Kamidogu podcast. I am Christopher Veljanovsky, and joining me in the virtual podcasting booth as co-host for this episode is the co-founder of Nerdcage Live, Jay St. G. Thank you so much for filling in for Toasty, who's currently ill and can barely speak.
Well, first and foremost, Toasty, get better soon, man. We miss you. And of course, Chris, thank you so much for having me here. It is an honor.
For sure, man. This is going to be a whole bunch of fun. Now, if you've been with us for a while, we're glad to have you back. And if you're new here, be sure to hit follow or subscribe for more great content. Help spread the word by telling a friend. It means so much.
Today, we are joined by David L. Craddock, author of numerous fiction and video game behind-the-scenes focused books. His newest book, Long Live Mortal Kombat Round 1, will be published this year in celebration of Mortal Kombat's 30th anniversary, and boy, it's jam-packed with some bloody goodness. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. To begin, David, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, guys. I've been a writer, a professional writer, meaning I get paid most of the time, for a little over 18 years now. Cut my teeth on writing about video games for a now defunct website called mygamer.com. And I quickly realized that what I loved even more than playing video games was just writing, telling stories. And I've published some fiction, but I think I'm most well known for my nonfiction about video games. The first book of mine that really kind of broke out was Stay a While and Listen, Book 1, about Blizzard and Diablo, which became a bestseller. And then I've done a book on Apple II games, a book on the making of Shovel Knight, on the original XCOM, and now moving on to Mortal Kombat, which I've been a fan of since I was 10 years old.
So how long have you been an author, and how did you get into this particular field of work?
Yeah, I grew up reading magazines that probably a lot of people from my generation did, Nintendo Power, Game Pro, EGM, and I enjoyed playing games, but I also realized that I was kind of the one my friends would come to when they'd want an opinion on a game they wanted to rent at Blockbuster over the weekend, kind of dated myself there, or just what I thought about this or that game. And as I read the magazines, it suddenly occurred to me that those words had to come from someone, and I decided, well, maybe I'll kind of endeavor to be a video game journalist. And I vacillated between that and programming for a while. I've actually been programming since I was 10. And I entered college on the computer science track, but it's funny, I would take like 16, 17 credit hours a semester, which is quite a lot, and then throw some writing courses on top just to relax. And I realized that as much as I enjoyed writing code, I enjoyed telling stories even more, so that made me focus more on the games journalism. And then I really haven't been active in that scene for a while because after doing a lot of reviews, previews, content of that nature, I just started focusing on my books because I realized that there were a lot of stories out there for classic games that had never been told. And, these days when you pre-order a collector's edition or a deluxe edition, physical or digital, you get an art book and a soundtrack and a peek behind the scenes. But as you might know, in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, those extras weren't standard. So I just I would look at games I loved as a kid, like Diablo, like Mortal Kombat, like Doom and Quake, and realized no one had really written about those. And so I just started putting my journalism skills to work, contacting people, doing hundreds of hours of interviews, compiling them with research, and writing books.
Excellent. So it's pretty clear that you're a diehard Mortal Kombat fan, just like everybody else in here. So real quick, what got you into the franchise in the first place?
Well, Mortal Kombat came out, of course, in October 1992. I was 10 years old, and I think I saw it at my dad's house. I had an arcade close to where my mom lived and another arcade closer to my dad's place. And we'd go out usually every Friday or Saturday night for dinner, and then to the mall where we'd make the rounds. We'd go to the arcade, or the game room, as my little brother called it, and then to Walden Books, where I actually ended up working weekends through college. But in the arcade, Dad would give us each a few bucks. And I remember one time I walked in, and there was just a crowd of people So you couldn't. I was shorter, again, only 10, so I couldn't see what they were playing. But apparently, a crowd around this particular machine was the norm because there was a second monitor mounted above it. And I looked up just as these two photorealistic is the word we use now, characters were fighting, and it looked like a movie. And then I saw the sky darken. One of them punched through the other's chest and ripped his heart out. And I was like, what the hell is this? I'd never, I went from Ninja Turtles to Mortal Kombat. I'm like, this is very, very, very abrupt shift in tone, but I like this. I want more of this. And the thing is, I know a lot of people love the spectacle, but what I found just as interesting were the secrets in Mortal Kombat. Before the internet, before people could just kind of spoil things, almost before they were even out, there was all this talk like, oh, hey, I saw this one guy kill another by tearing his head off. And when you think about that, if you just hear that as a kid, you're like, video games don't do that. Video games are like Mario and Tetris and Ninja Turtles, coincidentally. And I picked up, I think I begged my mom to get me a Mortal Kombat strategy guide because by that time I'd heard of Mortal Monday, September 13th, 1993. The only system I had at the time that could play Mortal Kombat was Game Boy, so I made do. I convinced myself that version was good, but I loved reading the strategy guide. It was really, really rough, and I actually got to talk to the guy who did the port for another book of mine, Arcade Perfect, which came out a few years ago, just about coin-op to home conversions, and ports are really rough. You're like one program and they're like, we need this yesterday, go. It's almost mission impossible. But I just loved reading the strategy guides, loved learning all the moves, the cheat codes. And it got to the point where I remember when I was in 6th grade, Mortal Kombat 2 was out, and I was so obsessed with Mortal Kombat. I didn't realize how obsessed I was until a teacher started calling me Mortal. It was my actually, this is 7th grade. My math teacher was like, Mortal, pass your homework up. And I looked around like, me? You're talking to me? I guess that's true. Okay, I'm Mortal now. And that the name stuck all through high school. And my first paid writing job actually was I would have kids saying, psst, hey man, I heard you got the codes. Let me get those codes. And I'm like, what? Oh, you mean like Abacab? You mean like Dullard? He's like, no, man, the fatalities. I want to know how to do the fatalities. So I was like, I'm not going to let you borrow my strategy guide because I don't know you. But I got an idea. So I went to the Macintosh lab, wrote up all the special moves, fatalities, cheat codes, copied them off, and I'd sell them for 25 cents a pop. So that was my first paid writing
Hustling.
gig. It was good times. Yeah. Hustle, man. That's it.
I mean, that actually reminds me of myself because when I was young, I used to collect strategy guides, and we often got American magazines here too. And I would just go to my electric typewriter and just type out biographies and moves and everything just for the sake of it. And I used to show my friends and, glue them in books alongside clippings. It was a whole lot of fun, and I'm glad I'm not the only strange one.
Oh,
I'm just laughing, David,
that's
because
the thing. Mortal Kombat. Go ahead.
I was going to say, David, I'm just laughing because I can just picture you at the school playground with a trench coat. You open up your trench coat and you got all these Mortal Kombat codes inside your trench coat.
Yeah.
Okay, we
got Genesis, we got Game Gear, we got Game Boy, we got SNES. Don't play that version, but we got it if you want it. Yeah, it was kind of like that.
I think it's pretty obvious at this point that Mortal Kombat is deeply instilled in all of us and has been for many decades. So, putting your fandom to one side, why in particular did you decide to write this trilogy of books?
So, one practice of mine as a writer I've known about that I kind of picked up on as I was doing it was that I didn't want to write a story anyone else had told. For example, I love Nintendo, but I'm not about to write a history of Nintendo because that's been done before. Practically everyone is doing that. And I look for a different point of entry. With Arcade Perfect, I thought, I love arcade games, but as a kid who didn't get to go to the arcade very often and who played most games at home, I wanted to know what it was like to port those games. In fact, one thing that interested me as a kid, I loved comparing and contrasting different versions. I didn't really care whether Sega or Nintendo or PC or whomever had the best version, the superior version. I was just interested in picking out why they were different, and I wanted to know how. How did those differences come about? And so that's what led me to write Arcade Perfect. So Mortal Kombat was something I'd wanted to write about for a long time. But I thought, Even though I know John Tobias, I interviewed him for Arcade Perfect. I thought a lot of people have written about the making Mortal Kombat, but there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I thought I could correct that. But what else is there? I need some other point of entry. And then I realized, Mortal Kombat, as you guys know, has had peaks and valleys. The peak was Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, and then people kind of started to slip off from 3 and then 4. I actually have Ken Fidesna, one of Midway's former managers, actually shared his notes with me. I have exact sales Mortal Kombat games. You would not believe how abysmally Mortal Kombat 4 sold in arcades, which kind of broke my heart because I was one of those weird vocal minorities who I loved Mortal Kombat 4. It was actually my favorite from the arcade trilogy for really nerdy reasons I'm sure we could get into. But you just realize, like, man, this is when it kind of fell off a cliff. And then, Mythologies, while I liked the story, obviously wasn't well reviewed. Neither was Special Forces. And so there were these dark periods. And I kept thinking it's kind of a miracle that Mortal Kombat is still around because, man, it really went through some high highs and some low lows. And I would ask myself, well, why is it still around? It's the fans. It's the fan community who, in my mind, have really kept the flame burning for Mortal Kombat, closing in on 30 years now. And so what I wanted to do with Long Live Mortal Kombat was to tell not only the story of how all the Mortal Kombat games from the 3 eras, the arcade, the home version, and the modern era, were made, but kind of how they touched lives through those eras. So in this book, you'll read about arcade rats, as they proudly called themselves, who just lived in arcade and spent, according to them, thousands of dollars learning things like the anti-air high punch and just hustling. And I mean, you guys, like, let's just group hug, right? Because that's all of us. I talked to the founders of Acclaim to get the never before told full story of how they put together Mortal Monday. And I talked to people who, there's a guy who shared a story that he would his escape from his abusive home was to go and play Mortal Kombat 2 for free at a 7-Eleven. And in exchange, the manager working the graveyard shift would just he'd say, okay, you sweep floors, I'll put it on free play for you. And that was important to me because, you guys know this, we grew up, all we heard about relating to Mortal Kombat was, this game is corrupting youths. And look, I haven't killed anybody, or at least they haven't found the bodies. And I thought, I want to talk to psychologists about this overreaction to violent games. And so there are 4 sections, one for each of the Mortal Kombat games in arcade, and you'll hear from John Tobias, you'll hear from a lot of other people who worked on these games, who did the home ports, but you'll also hear from community members to hear their stories of how Mortal Kombat became part of their lives. And I think it turned out really well, but I'm obviously kind of biased. So
I think we all are.
Yes.
And I can't blame parents' overreaction. My mom's she was appalled by it, but she just wanted what was best for her son, but she just didn't trust that her son wasn't a violent person. It's, it's entertainment, But yeah, I see where you're coming from there when you mention that. I'm getting flashbacks when you're telling me about the parents.
Oh man, I mean that's the thing, right? Like, you can't blame them because this was uncharted territory. There had been controversial games before, like Death Race, but that was black and white from a top-down view, running over stick figures. Okay, that was not Mortal Kombat. Pardon me, but the interesting thing I wanted to get into is the violence is only on the surface. Let's dive into it. Let's see if these games really do have adverse effects on people. And surprise, they don't. I won't get into the nitty-gritty of the research, but in fact, quite the opposite. Yeah. Everyone I've talked to they say Mortal Kombat has had a positive influence on their lives. It has mine as well. It's not just something I love, but now it's something I'm writing about. So I just kind of wanted to get to the bottom of that. And then, as we get into books 2 and 3, there'll be similar stories, but more relevant to those eras of the game.
Exactly. You just mentioned what I wanted to get to next. You mentioned that this book, Long Live Mortal Kombat Round 1, is part of a trilogy of books. And, this one's covering the arcade era and whatnot, up until Mortal Kombat 4. Mm-hmm. So is this your favorite era? And are you looking forward to writing more of these volumes of books?
I would say probably yes and yes. the thing about being a full-time anything really, but especially a writer, is writing, like a lot of creative pursuits, you guys probably know this, but it's feast or famine. If you're not working, money might not be coming in. And so just as you get older, I mean, it doesn't matter what you do, what your job or career is. You probably, you might be married, you might have kids, you might have more than one job. You just can't play video games as much as you used to. So the arcade era holds a special place in my heart, because back then I could just think about nothing but Mortal Kombat. I mean, I was sneaking strategy guides into school, slipping them between my Trapper Keeper and textbooks, so it looked like I was studying. But no, I was just rereading some of my favorite strategy guides again. And so I would say the arcade era is probably my favorite, just because not only did I have time to really get into it, but it was an exciting time. You could go to the arcade, meet total strangers, and form these. It's almost like, I don't know if you guys play Demon Souls or Dark Souls, but when you play co-op in those games, you fight until one of you dies or until you kill a boss, and then they're gone, and you might never interact with that person again. Arcades are kind of the same way. You might not meet these people again, but maybe you shared a fatality, or maybe you just talked to Mortal Kombat and formed this small, limited, but still impactful relationship with someone. And I just think that that's something the book, I hope I captured in the book, the fact that arcades were really these social hubs where you could meet people, and even if you never saw them again, you still remember them.
Yeah, I mean, that brings back a bad memory I told in our very first episode, but as a kid, I remember getting up to Shao Kahn on MK2, and another kid came up to the machine and put $1 in and hit start. Because in Australia, it was $1 per game, so it's pretty expensive to play. But yeah, he kicked my butt, and he of course took over from Shao Kahn, and the crowd was cheering him on, and I was like, "Hey, I did all the work."
Right.
So I think everyone has their own story, and yeah, it's a shame how arcades have more or less met their demise over the years. But at least us oldies, have the memories.
Yeah, it's something that, like, I'm not. The funny thing is, I'm not really a nostalgic person by nature. I reflect and reminisce a lot, but it's mostly to kind of. It's one of those who don't learn from history doomed to repeat it sort of things. But I say that I miss arcades, and it doesn't come from a place of nostalgia. It comes from a place because I think that if there's one thing the internet, social media in particular, has taught us, is that people generally aren't assholes if you're right in their face. Anybody can say anything from behind a keyboard or on their phone. But normally in an arcade, it was all kind of friendly. Even if you were competing, you were still playing the same game. You were bonded over this shared experience. And that's really something I feel that online gaming has yet to capture, and probably never will, just because there are so many variables and so much literal distance between you and whoever you're playing against, that it's not the same connection at all.
Yeah, nothing beats the arcades, nothing beats having your friends in the room playing on a split screen TV.
Exactly. GoldenEye, man. That's the first game I think of when I think of split screen play.
So what's it been like to put this book together? We often hear the term writer's block. Did you experience any real difficulties at any point? Or did your interviews allow you to sort of fill in any blanks you may have had?
I didn't experience writer's block, and I generally don't. I'm one of those people who doesn't really believe in writer's block as it's traditionally defined. I think that writer's block often occurs because of something external. Maybe you're tired, maybe you're stressed, maybe you're going through a bad relationship, and you're just not able to really kind of immerse yourself in the work. With this book, I didn't feel any of that. I had a blast writing it. It was fun the whole time. I'm very tired because I'm still working on it. It's just about polished and ready to go to the editors. But there's just so many stories to write that I was constantly, even as I was writing one chapter, already getting excited about what I'd be writing the next day and the day after that and the day after that. When I write fiction, I do tend to write linearly, and I know some authors don't. And that's the thing about writing. There is no wrong way to do it. There's only the right way, which is to do it. And however you do it is your right way. But with nonfiction, I would actually, if I would start to feel kind of burnt out on one particular area of the book, I'd go, you know what? I've got this other chapter outlined that's like 30 chapters ahead. I'm going to go write that one just because it sounds fun. and generally, work is work, but if you're having fun, you're probably doing a better job. And so when I started to get stressed or tired, I would just kind of try to pinpoint another area of the book I was really excited about, looking forward to writing, and just move on to that. It's kind of creative refreshment.
Excellent. So you've got some incredible stories spread out throughout the whole entire book, and some which have never been heard before. So, and you also managed to interview like 60 developers and, subject matter from experts from back in the day, including John Tobias himself. So, what was it like talking Mortal Kombat with all of them?
It was really, really fun. John Tobias especially has been so open and so giving of his time. I can't thank him enough for how much time he set aside just to answer many of the questions. I'm sure he's been asked 1,000 times, but we went, at least I hope we went a lot deeper than the stuff he's normally been asked about. But it was also, as much fun as I had talking to him, it was also fun getting different perspectives from within Midway. One of the reasons, I think a blessing and the curse of the video game industry is you have names that kind of become rock stars, and they're indelibly linked to certain properties as if they made the games by themselves. For example, at id Software in the 90s, that was John Romero and John Carmack. And id's team was small, and the two Johns played huge roles, but they had help from people like Adrian Carmack and Tom Hall and Michael Abrash and so forth. So, but the case with Mortal Kombat was interesting because John and Ed really deserve the lion's share of the credit. I mean, you had Dan Forden who did awesome soundtracks, but they were still working from John's and Ed's guidance. And that's one thing that John really impressed upon me, was just how much he and Ed operated as this two-headed dragon. They were constantly in sync with each other. And even when they'd have a creative dispute, they were always friendly. And it wasn't about personal animosity. It was what's best for the game. And I think we always got what was best for the game in what we played. But for example, other perspectives, I mentioned Ken Fidesna before. What was really fascinating from talking to him was how he and Neil Nicastro, who ran Midway at the time, was they asked for filler. They didn't expect Mortal Kombat to be anything special. They just had a gap in their schedule, and they said, hey, Ed and John want to make this martial arts game. Okay, fine, let's just slot it in there, and then that'll buy us some time until NBA Jam comes out. But then Mortal Kombat becomes this phenomenon, and they realize, oh wow, we have a hit on our hands, and they can't build machines fast enough. So it was really cool to get those other stories, so that you know what John Tobias is thinking about, but here's what management was thinking about. Here's how they viewed Mortal Kombat, and here's how Acclaim viewed Mortal Kombat. In fact, the interviews with Acclaim were particularly interesting. When I talked to some of the founders, they would have disputes with Midway every now and then, and they kind of said, like, we respect what those guys did, but when you think about it, they measured their cabinet sales in the tens of thousands. We measured our sales in the millions, so we feel like we played just as critical a role in Mortal Kombat. And I was like, I'd never really thought of it that way, but it makes sense. It's you can't underplay just how much of a role Acclaim had. Because as much as I love the arcade games, because of how old I was, and again, didn't go to arcades very often, I played Mortal Kombat games much, much more at home than I did in the arcades.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to say, like, as old school, we're all old school fans. Doesn't it feel like there's something missing since John Tobias left?
I think so.
Yeah. I certainly don't want to bash anyone. I think there are Mortal Kombat games that, as much as I love the franchise, there are certainly entries that didn't resonate with me nearly as much. I think that the 3D games were very good, but they never really felt like Mortal Kombat to me. Something was just different. And what is just the fact that we were on a 3D plane? They would kind of just like churn out characters. You had Moloch in Mortal Kombat 5, and then I loved the Deadly Alliance idea. I think the opening of Mortal Kombat 5, like seeing Liu Kang die, was as shocking as if Capcom would have killed off Ken or Ryu, right? It was like, whoa, you don't do that. So that was cool. Yeah. But then you had, no, it's Onaga, and no, it's this person. It just kind of felt like, as cheesy as Shao Kahn was, he left a mark on everyone because he was around for so long. And it felt like, at least when Tobias was around, that he and Ed, the characters they introduced, meant something. Whereas in the 3D games, they were just kind of turning them out, and I just never really got attached to any of them. And in fact, it's kind of no surprise when you think about it that Mortal Kombat 9 was so successful, because it went back to arguably the best games up to that point, but a retelling of them with a proper story mode. It's like, a lot of people are like, well, why are they going back to this roster? I'm like, because this was probably the best roster. This is Ultimate MK3 with the story of 1, 2, and 3. Like, how can you argue against this? This is a formula for success right here.
Did you have to jump through any hoops throughout the publishing or distribution process at all?
That's what we're still working on now. So I think by the time your listeners hear this, the book will be on Kickstarter. I just did a Kickstarter last year that far surpassed its funding goal, and that was a book about the making of XCOM. It's called Monsters in the Dark. The fulfillment, like printing and distribution, that's something I have down pretty well now. The interesting hurdles here, I think, will be for some of the bonus rewards that we have, which I won't spoil, but they're pretty cool, and they won't be hard to make or anything. But we've never done a campaign quite this big, but it's Mortal Kombat's 30th anniversary. Go big or go home is sort of the mentality for putting this together.
Awesome. Wanted to have you tell us about some of your other books. I know you mentioned Arcade Perfect, but also, do you have any other Mortal Kombat projects planned for the future?
Well, besides Long Live Mortal Kombat Round 2, and then the third book will be called Final Round, because it's always 2 out of 3. Those are probably the main ones. There might be a chance to write about Mortal Kombat by taking maybe a lateral step away from it, as I did with Arcade Perfect, where I also wrote about NBA Jam, Double Dragon, a lot of other classic arcade games. But probably the bulk of my focus as far as Mortal Kombat related writing will go into the Long Live MK trilogy, and then I'll likely be done with it. Just as this Stay a While and Listen, I've released the first 2 books. The third one will come out, and I've already had people ask, like, "Oh, you going to write about Diablo 4?" No. As much as I'm enjoying anticipating Diablo 4, and as good as I'm sure it will be, I can't write about these games forever. There will be other projects, but this one's particularly special, which is why I kind of talked myself into writing a series. So it's like, there's so much to explore that trying to pack 11 games, and those are just the numbered games, into one book just wouldn't be doing justice to any of them. So long live MK, and then probably on to the next projects from there.
So Long Live Mortal Kombat Round 1 is due to launch on Kickstarter, I believe, on the 29th of March. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah, in March.
I know you don't want to spoil too much, but can you tell us a little bit about this campaign and possibly maybe a little bit about what you have on offer?
Sure. So one thing we wanted to do, and when I say we, so I'm a hybrid author, as we call ourselves. It means I've self-published a lot of books like this one. I've also sold other books to publishers. And when I make the decision to self-publish, it's usually because I have ideas that I kind of want control over. I am a bit of a control freak when it comes to my stories. But with this one, I'm doing it through Digital Monument Press, which was a publishing company that I formed with my very talented wife, who's got a head for business and is an excellent graphic designer. So there'll be several editions of Long Live Mortal Kombat Round 1. 2, but in different forms. The standard edition will be available as a digital book, a paperback, and a hardcover. And then Ultimate Long Live Mortal Kombat 1 will be an oversized hardcover, same story, same contents, but with just a beautifully designed layout, a lot of photographs that fans and other people I've interviewed have submitted, including a lot of the developers. John Tobias has showed me some of the sketches he's never shown publicly. Nice. So I get to include those. There'll also be, if you go up the reward tiers, kind of like Mortal Kombat's battle plan, is kind of what I had in mind. You'll be able to get things like there'll be a bookmark that looks like a line of tickets you'd get from an arcade. There'll be an arcade token with the publisher's logo on it. Everything we wanted to do for the tiers was done through the filter of this has to capture the theme of being in an arcade. So, depending on which tier you back, you'll get the book, and you might also get some nice collectibles as well. And that's collectibles with a K, of course.
Excellent. So, David, we're going to jump over and have a little fun with this little segment that we call
Final Round.
So during this segment, we will ask you a series of quick questions just to get you to know you a little better. I believe you already answered this first one, but we're going to ask again anyway. So what is your favorite Mortal Kombat game?
Mortal Kombat 4.
Yes. It's really the first jump to 3D, and of course, come on, weapon combat, throwing rocks. I mean, and it was fast.
You know what I love? It was fast. It had the speed of Ultimate MK3, but I actually thought the combo system was really fun. You could kind of invent your own combos from the base set that they give you, rather than having to memorize the predefined strings of Mortal Kombat 3. And there was a lot of room for experimentation in there.
Absolutely. So who's your favorite combatant?
Ooh, Katana. She's my favorite character of all time. I just think she captures this beauty, nobility, and deadliness that I think no other Mortal Kombat character can quite live up to. She is... My heart beats for the princess. 10,000 years old, looks like she's not a day over 24, It's great.
Absolutely, and such a compelling story with her as well. And
exactly.
What was your very first job? I remember you mentioned you were hustling at the playground, making money that way.
That was, I guess that counts since I got paid in quarters, which is the currency I needed to play more Mortal Kombat. But I also, this wasn't my first job, but it was one of the first. I pushed carts at Walmart, and that was actually a lot of fun. The most mindless job you can imagine, but great to get outside and get some physical exercise, especially for someone who went on to spend so much time in front of screens.
What are some of your secret talents?
Secret talents. I have a head full of useless knowledge. I remember that, especially as it pertains to video games, if you're playing Super Mario Brothers 3, and you get to the card game, the memory game, and you want to know what the bottom 3 cards are in the bottom right, I still have those memorized. I have all sorts of cheat codes and just little historical facts about video games kind of stored up. I actually do go about emptying those out of my head when I get the chance to write about them. It's almost like I'm saying, oh, I get to finally apply this otherwise useless knowledge into a story.
What are some of your hobbies aside from writing and playing games?
I love to read. I probably enjoy reading as much as writing, and even more than playing video games, actually. Last year I read over 100 books. The year before, around 80 or 90. I love to read because it's, I don't know, I still kind of feel like the brain is the most powerful graphics processor ever created, and the ability to just kind of see stories come alive before your eyes in a way that only you've seen them is very appealing. And I hope to capture even a fraction of that magic, whether I'm writing a nonfiction story or a fiction story.
What is the funniest thing that's ever happened to you?
Okay, that's a great question. When I was in college on the computer science track, like I said, I would take some writing and literature courses just kind of for fun. And I wrote this paper on Harry Potter because I worked at a bookstore at the time, and I would see lines of people lining up for the newest Harry Potter book. And that kind of filled my heart with joy. See people get as excited about a book as they would, a new movie release or something. And I wrote this paper, and my teacher is this little short, maybe 5 foot tall older woman, was passing out the papers, and she's saying, okay, I read one paper in particular. I'm going to pass it back last because I would like that person to stand up and read it aloud. And I wasn't really paying attention. I was just kind of thinking about what I was going to do after class. And then she hands it to me and she goes, David, stand up and read your paper. And nobody likes that. Nobody likes to be put on the spot like that. I didn't like it. I still don't like it. But I did it, and I actually got a small round of applause. And I was like, this is so weird. I just did the same assignment you guys did. But whatever. It was nice. So I'm leaving. I gather my books up after class, and I hear my professor call my name. And this tiny woman comes bustling up to me holding a stack of papers. And she says, "David, what's your major?" And I said, "Computer science. I want to program video games." And before I could finish that sentence, she had stood up on her tiptoes and hit me over the head with that stack of papers. And I was like, all right, I've been assaulted in the middle of the hallway. What is happening here? And she said, "Quit fooling around with the computers. You're a writer. You should write." And that was kind of an epiphany, but it was also very funny because a lot of other kids kind of slowed down and were like, why is this professor beating up another student? But it was also a really kind of seminal event in my life. So I look back on that and laugh and maybe rub my head a little bit.
All right. Well, David, we just want to thank you for hanging out with us on the Komi Dogu podcast. And of course, we are looking forward to your Kickstarter campaign on March 8th. And we're looking forward to the release of the book. And we definitely wish you, all the success in the world moving forward. And again, hope everyone takes the time to check out all your work. And again, thanks so much for being on the show. This was awesome.
Oh, guys, thank you. I've been a longtime listener. I've really enjoyed your episodes and was just excited to add my name to the guest list. So thank you both for taking time out of your days to talk to me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, David. Best of luck. All right, and that's a wrap. Another great episode done and dusted. If you haven't already, be sure to check out this episode's notes for a link to David's Kickstarter campaign. This book truly is one for the fans of the franchise. Be sure to take a look, and if you like what you see, please consider purchasing a copy. I just hope you enjoy it half as much as we did. Jay, it's been an absolute pleasure co-hosting with you, and thank you again for keeping Toasty's seat warm. We'll definitely have to have you back for a future episode.
Chris, thank you so much. It was awesome. This was fun. I'm glad I got to do this. Can't wait to do more with you. And Toasty, get well and get better and get over here quick.
Hell yeah. All right, until then, combatants, you know how it goes. Have fun, stay safe, and
stay flawless.